Buried treasures of the Titanic rise to the surface. The fauna of West Africa flocks to Paris, and the Normandy countryside captured on canvas by the masterly brushstrokes of David Hockney. That's all coming up in today's show. Well, we're starting with good news from the art world and a decades-long hunt which is starting to bear fruit. An 18th century painting that had been hanging in a Dresden museum was finally returned to its owner's family last week. A great-great-granddaughter in France is now in possession of the artwork, which was looted by the Nazis during the Second World War.
Until just a few days ago, this 18th century portrait stolen by the Nazis was being exhibited at a Dresden museum in Germany. It's now back in France, thanks to the efforts of Parisian publisher Pauline Berg. For 5 years, she's been following in the footsteps of her great-grandfather and prolific art collector Jules Strauss. Her search led her to the archives of the Orsay Museum's library.
I discovered his art collection here, which I had barely heard of and knew nothing about. There are dozens of works of Degas, Renoir and Monet.
When the Nazis arrived to occupy Paris in 1940, they found the Louvre almost empty. Its director had already evacuated most of the art to the provinces to protect it. So the Nazis plundered private collections, especially those of Jewish homes. 100,000 objects were taken and transferred to Germany. Most were recovered after the war, but not always returned to their owners. It was during a painstaking search through the archives that Pauline Berg uncovered her great-grandfather's history that her family had never spoken about. This is where Jules Strauss lived at the start of the war. The Jewish banker had sold most of his collection before the Nazis arrived, but they took the last pieces when they requisitioned his home. Among them, this portrait of a royal mistress, the one his family have now recovered. But how does one prove that something belonged to an ancestor? That was also Claire Touchard's challenge. She found the answer in her great-grandfather's account books. René Gimpel was an art dealer and resistance fighter who was forced to sell off 3 André Derain works to fund his escape from Paris before dying in deportation. Gimpel's great-granddaughter recovered them after a 7-year battle.
It's
what's called a forced sale, because he had to sell at a really low price through middlemen. We don't know how much he sold them for, but we do know he was very disappointed with the price, because he wrote about it.
At the end of January, the city of Marseille returned to her a third painting by Derain, estimated to be worth several hundreds of thousands of euros.
I call on all French mayors to do the same. Look at what you have in your collections, make inventories, and give back property that was looted during World War II.
Specialists say the battle to return property to its owner's descendants is far from over, with hundreds of looted artworks still tucked away in collections around the world.
Here in Paris, public galleries and museums remain closed due to the coronavirus, but small, independent galleries are allowed to show work, and they've become a haven for art fans. One collection is drawing particularly enthusiastic crowds, new paintings and drawings from David Hockney. The British artist now lives in Normandy, and that has inspired these pieces. France 24's Axel Simon and James André went to the Lelong gallery to take a look.
He is the world's most expensive living artist. David Hockney has found a new muse, Normandy. He settled in the region 2 years ago. That was before the coronavirus pandemic broke out.
Il est très heureux. Il a vécu le confinement comme une aubaine. Il n'a pas de visiteurs, pas de journalistes, pas de quémandeurs, il ne voit personne. Il a peint pendant des années la Californie, il en a un peu fait le tour, il en avait assez de ce ciel qui est toujours bleu. Ensuite, il est revenu en Angleterre, dans le Yorkshire, il est resté une dizaine d'années, il a peint les paysages anglais, et il a trouvé ici en Normandie une autre lumière.
Museums in Paris are closed, and art buffs flock to the Lelong gallery to discover the Hockney exhibition.
Ah, c'est tout à fait essentiel, autant que mon commerce à moi qui suis bouquiniste sur les quais de Seine. Parce que sans nous, sans la culture, disons, je crois qu'il n'y a plus de vie.
Most of the new drawings and paintings depict the artist's own garden in vivid color through the seasons.
Je sais qu'il travaille beaucoup sur iPad dernièrement. Et là, je me rends compte que ce sont des tableaux avec de la vraie peinture, en quelque sorte. Et j'aime beaucoup les couleurs, j'aime beaucoup sa vision de la nature.
C'est joyeux, ça fait du bien.
c'est le printemps. Donc on vient voir des œuvres, mais c'est aussi pour se faire du bien au moral.
This is a rare opportunity for Hockney enthusiasts to discover these works together. These paintings were all sold before the exhibition even opened to the public.
To some long submerged artefacts that will soon be under the spotlight now. Dozens of items taken from the wreck of the Titanic have been assembled at the Cité de la Mer Museum in Cherbourg. As soon as cultural venues here in France reopen, visitors will be able to see those objects, as well as learning more about the ocean liner which sank in April 1912. Sharon Gaffney brings us a preview.
Submerged at the bottom of the ocean for decades, this book once belonged to a passenger on the Titanic. It's among 53 objects that are on a 2-year loan to this museum in Cherbourg in northern France, after being taken from the wreck of the vessel and painstakingly restored.
Ça fait évidemment longtemps qu'on travaille sur ces objets sur photo, qu'on a remonté le fil de leur histoire. Mais alors les avoir en main comme ça, en effet, c'était très très émouvant. Et de se rappeler toutes les histoires auxquelles ils sont liés, c'était particulièrement touchant.
These shoes belong to a 17-year-old passenger who studied arithmetic in England. Edgar Samuel Andrew bought them as part of the outfit he'd planned to wear to his brother's wedding in the US.
La valise d'Edgar a été remontée en 2000, ouverte et a subi de nombreux traitements pendant de nombreux mois, en effet, pour restaurer les papiers notamment. Et c'est pour ça qu'aujourd'hui, on peut admirer ces objets très très fragiles.
The museum has just obtained exclusive broadcasting rights to some of the archival footage from the wreck. The passenger liner famously hit an iceberg on its maiden voyage from Southampton to New York in 1912.
Ce que j'aimerais, c'est que dans un avenir plus ou moins proche, j'espère 2024 en tout cas, c'est que le public, les enfants, les familles puissent, avec beaucoup de respect, descendre d'une manière virtuelle sur le champ de débris sur l'épave et à la rencontre des objets.
The exhibition space is free of visitors for now, but the museum is ready to take the public back on board as soon as government health restrictions allow.
Next, to an exhibition which brings West African birds to Paris. The show's called Free Zone, and it's just opened at the Institute of Islamic Cultures in Paris's Goutte d'Or district. Organised in partnership with Cameroonian and Moroccan cultural centres as part of the Africa 2020 season, the exhibition has had to adapt to the pandemic. Mandy Hashmati, Georgie Azbek and Emerald Maxwell take us on a guided tour.
You have just entered the Zone Franche, or Free Trade Zone. Here you can exchange your euros for afro, the fictitious currency of this exhibition dedicated to the idea of borders, and in particular, the movement across them.
Nous avons rencontré des personnes qui ont voyagé,
We met people who have travelled, who have crossed borders, so that we can embrace the concept of flow. We don't just travel with clothes and possessions, we also travel with the imagination and the mind.
Avec des imaginaires, avec de la pensée.
It's an adventure from Douala to Paris via Tangier, represented by maps, but also by birds. Like this West African hornbill, the emblem of the Senufo people from the same area. 14 of these birds will be dotted around the streets of Paris's Goutte d'Or neighbourhood from March.
The hornbill has become a powerful symbol for us. It is an invitation to travel, but also to celebrate differences.
Other birds, such as owls and sparrows, are at the heart of work by Choul Kriesh. The Franco-Moroccan artist depicts in black and white the places she's travelled through.
For me, birds are really the symbol of unfettered travel, and they also raise the whole poetic question of borders and territories, because where are the borders in the sky?
The exhibition can be visited online for the moment. It'll cross the virtual border as soon as COVID restrictions allow.
And finally, gallery owner Kamel Menour had already staked out his territory here in Paris with 3 branches of his art space. Now he's opening up a 4th, just a stone's throw from the River Seine. And who better to inaugurate those new digs than a duo of contemporary artists, Philippe Parreno and Daniel Burin. They've created a colourful, immersive piece to bring a little light to the dark days of winter. We'll leave you with a glimpse of that installation. Do remember our website. We're also on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. There's more news coming up on France 24 just after this.
Because a new page of history gets written every day. Because breaking news can't wait. Information everywhere. In all situations. On every subject. Understanding the world. Imagining the world. France 24. A different take on the news.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.
Allez-y, filmez! Filmez pour l'histoire.
It's 2011 and rebellion begins sweeping across parts of North Africa and the Middle East. This is the Arab Spring. From Tunisia to Egypt, from Syria to Yemen, thousands of people defied the authorities and risked their lives to demand freedom, equality, and better lives.
Confronting police who are shooting tear gas directly at them, as you can see behind me. Look at the protesters right behind me.
Relive history and the early months of the Arab Spring through the notebooks of France 24's correspondents and our reporters' stories. Catch reporters on France 24 and France24.com.